Wife suddenly wanted a baby after zero action for months, but as a cybersecurity professional I treat digital breadcrumbs like evidence. She tried to trap me with another man's baby, so here's how I found out and turned the tables. The revenge I plotted was so perfectly timed and hilariously petty that I'm still impressed with myself. What I'm about to tell you might make me sound like the bad guy, but when your spouse tries to baby trap you with someone else's kid, all bets are off. You'll see how months of hiding left a clear trail and how one party ended it all. But first, let me paint you a picture of just how obvious the signs were. The perfect storm of suspicious timing. After weeks of cold shoulders and canceled nights, 8 months into our usual routine, it felt off when she suddenly wanted to try for a baby. We went from being all over each other to her flinching when I accidentally brushed her arm reaching for the remote. Then one random Tuesday morning, she walks into the kitchen wearing this tight little outfit I hadn't seen in forever and announces she wants to start trying for a baby. Right now, today, this instant, the whiplash gave me a concussion. I'm sitting there with my coffee thinking, lady, you've been acting like my presence physically repulsed you since Christmas and now you want to make a human together? The math wasn't adding up. It was like she flipped a switch overnight. Sarah had always been predictable, routine-oriented. She meal prepped on Sundays, paid bills on the 15th, and scheduled everything including our romantic life down to the minute. This sudden baby fever was about as natural as her hair color. She went from treating our bedroom like a quarantine zone to practically dragging me upstairs before I finished my breakfast. The personality flip was so dramatic I wondered if someone had body snatched my wife. My brain kicked into detective mode faster than you could say suspicious behavior. I started connecting dots that formed a picture so obvious it might as well have been painted in neon colors. The months of rejection followed by sudden desperation. She'd been secretive, digital breadcrumbs everywhere, then flipped to all-in baby talk. The pieces were forming a pattern that screamed one thing loud and clear. I felt like one of those TV detectives who notice everything except I was running on pure paranoia and too much caffeine. Every little thing she did became evidence in my mental case file. The way she moved differently like she was protecting something. How she suddenly cared about eating healthy after living on takeout for years. The mysterious doctor appointments she claimed were just routine checkups. My inner monologue sounded like a crime show narrator breaking down clues for viewers too slow to keep up. Modern technology makes catching cheaters easier than ordering pizza, and cheaters today are about as subtle as a marching band. Everyone thinks they're criminal masterminds until they realize their phones track everything, their apps save data, and their browser history tells stories they never meant to share. Sarah thought she was being clever, but she left digital breadcrumbs everywhere like she wanted to get caught. The investigation unfolded with all the subtlety of a demolition crew. I became obsessed with figuring out what was really happening, because the alternative was accepting that my wife had genuinely lost her mind. I started noticing patterns in her behavior that were more obvious than road signs. She'd get these secretive phone calls that made her voice change completely. Text messages would light up her face in ways I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Something was definitely happening, and it wasn't a sudden case of baby fever. My wife's acting skills belonged in a middle school drama production. She'd try to seem casual while doing obviously suspicious things, like claiming she needed to run errands but coming back with nothing to show for hours of being gone, or insisting she was too tired for any physical contact but having enough energy to stay up late whispering into her phone in the bathroom. The performance was so bad it was almost insulting. I realized I was watching someone who thought they were pulling off the crime of the century while actually leaving evidence everywhere they went. She'd cover her phone screen when notifications popped up, then forget and leave it face up when she went to shower. She'd claim she was going to bed early, but I'd see the light from her phone under the covers for hours. The contradictions were piling up faster than her excuses. Every day brought new clues that confirmed what my gut already knew. The way she'd panic when I came home unexpectedly. How she'd quickly change the subject whenever I mentioned anything related to pregnancy or babies in general conversation. The sudden interest in taking separate vacations after years of traveling together. She was building a case against herself without realizing it. The more I watched, the more obvious it became that whatever was happening had been going on for months. This wasn't some spontaneous decision or sudden change of heart about starting a family. This was calculated, planned, and poorly executed. She was following some kind of timeline that didn't include keeping me in the loop until absolutely necessary. I started thinking about all the signs I'd missed or explained away over the past few months. The mood swings I'd attributed to work stress. The dietary changes she claimed were about getting healthier. The way she'd been avoiding certain foods and drinks without explanation. The pieces were forming a picture that was becoming impossible to ignore. That's when I decided to check her period tracker app. We shared passwords for everything, or so she thought. She'd been religious about logging her cycles for years, tracking everything down to the smallest detail. But when I opened it up, there were no entries for 3 months. Nothing. Complete radio silence from someone who documented every aspect of her reproductive health like she was conducting scientific research. The evidence was mounting and my confidence was growing. I wasn't just suspicious anymore. I was certain something major was happening and I was going to find out exactly what it was. Sarah's plan, whatever it involved, was about to meet the investigative skills of a man who had way too much time on his hands and absolutely no intention of being played for a fool. That night, I came home early from a client meeting and overheard the call that changed everything. Detective mode activated. Nancy Drew wishes she was this good. I treated this like a corporate security breach, every message screenshot, every appointment noted. My cybersecurity background suddenly became useful for something other than protecting corporate networks. I had suspicion, basic Google skills, and way too much free time while Sarah was off doing whatever she was doing. Time to put those skills to work. My approach was methodical as hell. I created folders on my laptop labeled things like timeline analysis and digital evidence collection because apparently I thought I was running the FBI now. Every suspicious text message got screenshotted. Every weird phone call got noted with time and duration. I started tracking her movements like she was a person of interest in a federal investigation. The level of detail I was recording would have impressed actual detectives, or at least made them laugh at my dedication. The period tracker app was my goldmine. Sarah had been religious about logging her cycles for 3 years straight. Color-coded entries, symptom tracking, mood indicators, the whole production. Her last entry was in March with cramps noted. Then suddenly radio silence until June. No logs since March until June. I'm sitting there looking at this gap in data thinking either she forgot how to use technology or something major happened that she didn't want documented. 3 discoveries sealed the deal. First, that period tracker gap screaming pregnancy. Second, finding positive home pregnancy tests hidden in her purse like contraband. Third, I installed cameras in our bedroom, living room, and kitchen, all areas where I had every legal right to record under one-party consent laws. The rest of the evidence was just bonus material. Prenatal vitamins ordered 3 months ago, search history including how early can pregnancy tests detect and hiding morning sickness from husband, different routes to work that passed by a certain someone's neighborhood. Every new piece of evidence I found felt like winning the lottery. Finding those prenatal vitamin receipts in her email, jackpot. Discovering she'd been Googling pregnancy calculators, Christmas morning. Realizing she'd been taking different routes to work that happened to pass by a certain someone's neighborhood. I practically threw myself a parade. My internal celebration after each discovery was completely disproportionate to the actual significance, but I was running on pure vindication energy. The evidence pile grew faster than Sarah's lies multiplied. Text messages with someone listed as regional manager that definitely weren't about pharmaceutical sales. Photos automatically backed up to our shared cloud storage showing her at restaurants I'd never been to with people I'd never met. Bank statements revealing charges at medical offices during hours she claimed to be in client meetings. Each piece of evidence made the previous pieces make more sense, creating this beautiful web of deception that she'd woven herself. My excitement grew daily as I realized how thoroughly I'd caught her red-handed. The proof was more solid than concrete and twice as damaging. She thought she was being careful, but she was leaving evidence everywhere like some kind of cheating breadcrumb trail. I had timestamps, locations, financial records, and digital communications. If this was a court case, her defense attorney would have quit and recommended she just confess. I started cross-referencing everything like I was building a federal case. Her claimed work schedule versus her actual location data. Her reported symptoms versus typical pregnancy progression timelines. Her stated reasons for doctor visits versus the actual medical offices she was visiting. The inconsistencies were piling up faster than her excuses, and I was documenting every single contradiction with the dedication of a court stenographer. The beauty of modern cheating is that cheaters think they're tech-savvy while actually being digital disasters. Sarah would delete text conversations but forget about notification previews. She'd clear her browser history but leave Google Maps location data intact. She'd claim her phone died during suspicious time periods, but somehow still managed to post Instagram stories. Watching someone try to cover their tracks while accidentally creating more evidence was better than any comedy show. I felt like I was conducting a masterclass in investigation techniques, cross-referencing calendar entries with credit card statements, analyzing communication patterns for unusual frequency spikes, monitoring app usage data for new installations or increased activity. I was turning into a surveillance expert powered entirely by suspicion and spite. My attention to detail was reaching obsessive levels, but the results spoke for themselves. Sarah remained completely oblivious to being under investigation by her own husband. She'd come home from her suspicious activities acting like everything was normal while I sat there knowing exactly where she'd been, who she'd been with, and what they'd been doing. The disconnect between her perceived reality and actual reality was almost entertaining. She thought she was pulling off this elaborate scheme while I was 3 steps ahead documenting her every move. The irony was perfect. She was trying to deceive someone who literally made a living finding security vulnerabilities and protecting against threats. My job required me to think like attackers, anticipate deceptive tactics, and gather evidence of unauthorized activities. She picked the worst possible person to try running a long-term deception campaign against. I was professionally trained to catch people doing exactly what she was doing. My confidence reached peak levels as I realized how completely I'd outmaneuvered her. Every conversation we had was me gathering more intelligence while she thought she was successfully managing the situation. She was walking directly into the trap I was building while helping me construct it. The woman had no idea she was living with someone who turned marriage investigation into a full-time hobby powered by unlimited motivation and spite. With cameras rolling and tests in hand, I was ready for the next step. But first, I needed backup, someone who could follow her movements off the books. That's when I realized I had all the evidence I needed, but now came the hardest part, pretending I knew absolutely nothing. The art of playing dumb while being brilliant. My acting performance deserved an Academy Award. I became the most supportive, loving, clueless husband you've ever seen. Sarah would drop these obvious hints about wanting to start a family, and I'd respond with exactly the right amount of enthusiasm mixed with concern about timing. I'd ask questions like, "Are you sure we're ready financially? And what about your career goals?" while internally laughing at how perfectly I was playing the role of devoted but cautious spouse. She ate it up completely. The internal battle was brutal. Every conversation was me fighting the urge to just scream, "I know what you're doing," while forcing myself to stick to the plan. My brain kept switching between wanting immediate satisfaction and recognizing that patience would deliver something way better. Could have kicked down that sliding door and sent her packing, but that's what a weak man does. Acts on emotion, makes stupid decisions. I'd watch her manipulate conversations toward baby topics and think about how much more satisfying it would be to let her dig this hole as deep as possible before I buried her in it. Sarah's confidence grew daily as she convinced herself that her plan was working perfectly. She started getting bolder with her suggestions about trying to conceive. She'd bring up friends who were having babies, mention how cute kids looked at restaurants, even started following pregnancy and parenting accounts on social media where I could see them. She thought she was subtly planting seeds when really she was just confirming everything I already knew. Her smugness was almost insulting. The day she announced her pregnancy was comedy gold. She set up this whole romantic dinner, candles and everything, then pulled out a positive pregnancy test like she was revealing some magical surprise. My reaction was perfectly calibrated. Shock, then joy, then concern about timing, then more joy. I even teared up a little, which really sold the performance. Meanwhile, my internal monologue was roasting her acting skills and marveling at how bad she was at this whole deception thing. What made it even better was knowing she'd been practicing. I'd recorded one of her phone calls where she rehearsed the whole announcement. "Honey, I have something amazing to tell you. We're going to be parents." She must have run through that line 20 times, adjusting her tone and timing like she was preparing for Broadway. Hearing her practice manipulation while I sat there pretending to be surprised was peak entertainment. Watching someone lie poorly while thinking they're a master manipulator became my favorite entertainment. Sarah would explain away her pregnancy symptoms like she was teaching me about reproductive biology for the first time. She'd claim she had no idea she was pregnant despite clearly being months along. Her explanations for why she was already showing became increasingly creative and increasingly stupid. I'd nod along sympathetically while internally keeping score of all the contradictions she was creating. My amusement reached new heights every time she dug herself deeper into this obvious hole. She started making up stories about when we conceived, creating this fictional timeline that didn't match anything in reality. She'd reference conversations about trying for a baby that never happened and claim she'd been tracking ovulation when I knew her period app had been empty for months. Each lie required 3 more lies to support it, and I watched this house of cards grow taller and more unstable. The tension of maintaining this act was insane. Some days I'd wake up planning to just confront her and get it over with, but then she'd do something so ridiculous that I'd remember why I was playing the long game. Like when she started researching baby names and asking my opinion, or when she suggested we start looking at cribs online. The audacity was breathtaking, and I knew my eventual reveal would be worth every moment of this torture. Sarah had no clue that her husband had suddenly developed world-class acting abilities. She thought the same guy who couldn't pretend to like her mother's cooking was somehow missing all these obvious signs of deception. I was giving her exactly the reactions she wanted while mentally documenting every single lie for future use. She was so focused on executing her plan that she never noticed how perfectly I was playing my part. Every conversation became this weird performance where I was the audience and the actor simultaneously. I'd ask innocent questions about her doctor appointments just to hear what new fiction she'd create. I'd suggest activities that pregnant women shouldn't do just to watch her suddenly become concerned about safety. I'd mention friends who were struggling to conceive just to see her pretend to be sympathetic, while probably feeling guilty about her own situation. The medical appointments were particularly entertaining. She'd come home with stories about routine checkups that involved way too much detail for someone who claimed to be barely pregnant. She'd mention blood tests and measurements that didn't align with her supposed timeline. I'd act concerned and ask follow-up questions that forced her to elaborate on her lies. Watching her try to remember her own fiction was better than watching comedy shows. Sarah started involving me in planning for this fictional baby, and I played along with enthusiasm that must have seemed genuine. We looked at strollers online while I calculated exactly how far along she really was. We discussed nursery themes while I planned how I was going to expose her lies. We talked about baby names while I thought about what I was going to name my revenge plan. The disconnect between what she thought was happening and what was actually happening was incredible. My plan was evolving into something more elaborate than most heist movies. I wasn't just going to catch her in the lie. I was going to create a situation where she'd expose herself in front of everyone who mattered. Family, friends, coworkers, the other guy, everyone needed to see exactly who she really was. The level of detail I was putting into this revenge plot was probably excessive, but so was her level of deception. The timing had to be perfect. Too early and she might find a way to spin it. Too late and I'd miss the maximum impact window. I was waiting for the right moment when her confidence would be at its peak and her lies would be impossible to maintain. She was walking straight into a trap that she was helping me build and she had no idea what was coming. She thought she'd crafted the ultimate reveal, little did she know how ready I was to counter. But first, I had to sit through her increasingly desperate attempts to make her timeline work. Pregnancy math that would make calculators cry. The numbers didn't add up no matter how I calculated them. By my math, she was at least 12 weeks along, possibly further based on those positive tests I'd found months earlier. But Sarah kept insisting we'd conceived right after her sudden baby fever announcement, which would put her at maybe 6 weeks pregnant. Looking at her body, the timeline, and basic biology, she was clearly months further along. I'm no doctor, but I've seen enough pregnant women to know the difference between 6 weeks and 16 weeks. The timeline was impossible. Receipts showed vitamins ordered months before her announced conception. I found prenatal vitamin bottles hidden in her bathroom drawer with purchase dates from 3 months back. She'd been taking them religiously while claiming she had no idea she was pregnant. When I casually mentioned that we should probably get her some vitamins now that she was expecting, she got this panicked look and said she'd already started taking some. The smoking gun was right there in black and white. Sarah's attempts to explain away her growing belly became increasingly desperate and creative. First, it was bloating from the fertility supplements she claimed to be taking. Then it was stress eating because she was so excited about trying for a baby. When those excuses stopped working, she blamed it on her new workout routine that was apparently building core muscles in ways that defied physics. The woman was running out of reasonable explanations faster than she was running out of loose clothing. Her belly already had that unmistakable curve that doesn't happen overnight, no matter how much she blamed it on bloating. Watching her contort herself into positions that would minimize her silhouette was like watching someone try to hide an elephant behind a lamppost. She'd suck in her stomach when she thought I wasn't looking, then forget and let it relax when she got distracted. She'd wear flowing tops that only highlighted the bump they were supposed to hide. The discrepancies between her claimed conception date and actual pregnancy progression were comedy gold. She'd insist she was barely pregnant while simultaneously displaying months of pregnancy progression. Her face had that fullness that comes with pregnancy hormones working over time. Her gait had changed in ways that happen when your center of gravity shifts from a growing belly. She was showing physical evidence of a pregnancy that had been developing for months, not weeks. My evidence collection was growing daily, and every piece contradicted her timeline more dramatically than the last. Her internet search history included things like second trimester symptoms and hiding pregnancy bump from weeks before she announced her pregnancy. Bank statements showed charges at medical offices during times she claimed to be in client meetings. The documentation was building a case that would make any prosecutor jealous. Sarah's doctor appointments became elaborate productions of fiction. She'd come home with stories about routine checkups that involved way too much detail for someone supposedly barely pregnant. She'd mention blood work and measurements that didn't align with her claimed timeline. When I'd ask follow-up questions, she'd get flustered and change the subject or claim she didn't remember the specifics. Her medical fiction was almost as bad as her pregnancy math. Her attempts to involve me in pregnancy planning while maintaining her false timeline created hilarious contradictions. She'd suggest we start looking at baby furniture while claiming she was only a few weeks along. She'd want to discuss nursery themes when most couples wouldn't even announce the pregnancy yet. She'd bring up maternity leave policies at work while insisting she'd barely missed her period. The eagerness didn't match the supposed timing. Sarah's panic became visible as she realized maintaining her lie required more creativity than she possessed. She'd get this look when I'd ask simple questions about her doctor appointments or pregnancy progress. The wheels in her head would start spinning as she tried to remember what lies she'd already told and which new ones would support them. Watching her mental gymnastics was better entertainment than anything on television. My amusement reached peak levels when she started researching pregnancy announcements online. She was planning how to tell our families about a pregnancy that was already halfway done. She'd show me cute ideas for revealing the news while her belly was clearly visible to anyone paying attention. The disconnect between her perceived timeline and reality was so dramatic it was almost surreal. The morning sickness charade was particularly entertaining. She dramatically rushed to the bathroom in the mornings, making sure I heard all the retching sounds, but her timing was off. Real morning sickness from a recent conception doesn't start immediately, and hers began right after her announcement. She was performing symptoms on a schedule that made no biological sense. Sarah's deception skills were about as subtle as a marching band playing in a library. Every attempt to maintain her lie created new holes in her story. Every explanation raised more questions than it answered. Every day brought new evidence that contradicted her timeline. She was building a house of cards in a hurricane and wondering why it kept falling down. The physical evidence kept mounting against her story. Her clothes had been getting tighter for months, not weeks. She was displaying clear signs of a pregnancy that had been progressing for far longer than she claimed. The woman had picked the wrong husband to try running this kind of operation against, and she was about to find out exactly how wrong her calculations had been. I had her entire schedule cross-checked, and it was time to get my friend Rodriguez involved. But first, I needed to learn more about the other player in this comedy of errors. The other man, a character study in poor life choices. Meet Warren, the other man who turned poor decision-making into an art form. This guy made two critical errors that sealed his fate: showing up to Sarah's OBGYN appointment in broad daylight where anyone could see them, and keeping ultrasound photos in his car like some kind of pregnancy trophy collection. I discovered Sarah's accomplice through the most obvious digital breadcrumbs imaginable. His name kept popping up in her text notifications, her call logs, and even her work calendar where she'd scheduled meetings with him that definitely weren't about pharmaceutical sales. My investigation into Warren revealed a pattern of careless mistakes that made tracking him effortless. He used his real name when making hotel reservations that showed up on Sarah's credit card statements. He left reviews for those same hotels using his actual profile with his real photo attached. He'd tag Sarah in Instagram posts at restaurants across town while she was supposedly in client meetings. His LinkedIn profile showed he worked at the same pharmaceutical company as Sarah, which explained their connection but raised serious questions about their professionalism. Warren's complete lack of discretion made my evidence collection almost too easy. He parked his car in our neighborhood on days when Sarah worked from home, apparently thinking nobody would notice the same vehicle showing up repeatedly. He'd call her during hours when any reasonable person would be working or spending time with their own family. Phone records showed conversations lasting hours during times when he should have been focused on his actual job responsibilities. The guy was creating a digital paper trail that would have impressed forensic accountants. The scope of this betrayal expanded daily as I connected more dots between Sarah and Warren's activities. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning an entire future together funded by my money and built on lies about paternity. Their text conversations, which Sarah thought she'd hidden by changing his contact name to regional manager, revealed months of scheming about how to extract maximum financial benefit from our divorce. They discussed timing, strategy, and even practiced what Sarah would say when she announced her pregnancy. Warren's own complicated situation made this entire scheme even more ridiculous. The guy was married with 2 kids of his own, trying to juggle an affair with Sarah while maintaining his own deception at home. His wife apparently had no idea he was planning to leave her for his pregnant coworker. He was running 2 separate lies simultaneously, neither of which he was particularly good at maintaining. The complexity he'd created for himself was staggering, and I knew it was going to make his downfall twice as dramatic. These 2 thought they were running some sophisticated operation, while being caught by someone whose detective skills came entirely from watching too many crime shows and having unlimited Wi-Fi access. Sarah would come home from dates with Warren thinking she'd covered her tracks perfectly, not realizing I'd already documented where they'd been, what they'd eaten, and how long they'd stayed. Warren would send her flowers at work with cards that referenced inside jokes about their secret relationship. Warren remained completely oblivious to being under surveillance by an amateur detective with unlimited time and motivation. He'd continue his routine of secret meetings with Sarah, apparently convinced that changing restaurants occasionally constituted proper operational security. He'd send her romantic messages during his lunch breaks, not realizing that her husband was reading every word. He'd plan weekend getaways, while his own wife thought he was attending work conferences. His social media presence became a goldmine of evidence that he was creating without any awareness of how it would be used against him. Photos at locations where he'd been with Sarah, check-ins at places that contradicted his supposed whereabouts, even fitness app data that showed his running routes passing by our house during times when Sarah was home alone. Warren was building a case against himself with the dedication of someone who wanted to get caught, but lacked the self-awareness to realize it. The financial implications of Warren's involvement added another layer of comedy to this situation. The man was planning to leave his wife and kids to start a new life with Sarah and a baby that would require child support payments he couldn't afford. His salary information, which was publicly available through his company's transparency policies, showed he was barely covering his current family's expenses. Adding Sarah and a baby to his financial obligations would bankrupt him faster than a gambling addiction. Warren's work situation presented opportunities for maximum damage that I was definitely planning to exploit. His company had strict policies about relationships between employees, especially when one person held a supervisory position over another. Their affair was a direct violation of workplace conduct standards that could result in immediate termination for both of them. I had documentation of their relationship spanning months, including evidence of how it had affected their professional responsibilities. The irony of Warren helping Sarah deceive a cybersecurity expert was lost on both of them. They thought they were dealing with a trusting husband who would never question his wife's motives or investigate suspicious behavior. They had no idea they were up against someone who'd turned catching them into a full-time hobby powered by professional skills and personal motivation. My realization that including Warren in the revenge plan would double the satisfaction was the moment this whole operation shifted into high gear. Taking down Sarah was going to be personally fulfilling, but destroying Warren's life in the process was going to be pure bonus entertainment. The man had inserted himself into my marriage with the intention of profiting from its destruction. His involvement had turned a simple case of infidelity into an elaborate fraud scheme that deserved an equally elaborate response. Warren was about to get front row seats to the fallout too, but first, I needed to stop just collecting evidence and start planning something that would make this whole situation unforgettable. Building the perfect trap, revenge planning 101. My transformation from detective to mastermind happened overnight. This wasn't going to be some emotional confrontation in our kitchen where Sarah could cry her way out of consequences. This required precision, timing, and strategic thinking that would destroy her lies so completely that she'd never recover from the fallout. The planning phase consumed every spare minute I had. I created detailed timelines, backup scenarios, and contingency plans for every possible reaction she might have. My laptop became mission control complete with folders organized by evidence type, witness lists, and legal documentation. I researched everything from divorce law to public embarrassment techniques. Sarah's deception had been months in the making, so my response needed to match that energy. Sarah continued walking directly into my carefully constructed trap while maintaining complete confidence in her brilliant scheme. She'd come home from dates with Warren acting like she'd successfully managed another day of deception. She'd update me on her fake pregnancy symptoms while I mentally added each lie to my growing presentation. She was so focused on executing her plan that she never noticed how perfectly I was setting up her destruction. My elaborate scheme centered around maximum public embarrassment because private confrontations allow for damage control. Sarah needed to face consequences in front of everyone who mattered. Family members who'd supported her, friends who'd believed her lies, coworkers who'd covered for her suspicious behavior, and most importantly, Warren's wife who deserved to know exactly what her husband had been doing during his supposed work trips. The guest list alone was going to ensure this confrontation became legendary in our social circle. The comedy of Sarah helping plan her own exposure reached peak absurdity when she suggested we throw a party to announce the pregnancy to our families. She wanted to gather everyone together for a big reveal where she'd share the wonderful news about our expanding family. I agreed immediately, volunteering to handle all the planning details while she focused on preparing her announcement. She thought I was being supportive when really I was organizing the most devastating public humiliation in modern relationship history. Balancing my cover while preparing for the big reveal required acting skills I didn't know I possessed. I'd spend my days planning her destruction, then come home and act like the devoted husband excited about becoming a father. I'd research divorce attorneys while she researched baby names. I'd compile evidence of her lies while she planned nursery themes. The disconnect between what she thought was happening and what was actually happening created this surreal daily routine that almost broke my brain. 3 strategic elements formed the foundation of my plan. The camera footage I'd been collecting showed their meetings, their dates, their entire affair timeline documented in high definition. The DNA evidence from Warren's discarded water bottle would prove paternity beyond any doubt. The party itself would serve as the perfect stage for maximum exposure and immediate consequences for everyone involved. My attorney consultation locked down the legal groundwork with concrete assurance. He reviewed my evidence and said this was the cleanest case he'd ever seen. The prenuptial agreement I'd insisted on years earlier was going to protect my assets completely. The documentation of her affair and pregnancy deception would eliminate any claims to alimony. I wasn't just planning to embarrass her, I was ensuring she'd face maximum financial consequences for her choices. Every piece fell into place with precision that impressed even me. The prenatal paternity test results that confirmed my suspicions, the communication records between Sarah and Warren discussing their scheme, the financial documentation showing money transfers and suspicious expenses, the timeline analysis proving she'd been pregnant for months before claiming conception. I had built a case so airtight that her defense attorney would probably recommend immediate surrender. Sarah's unwitting cooperation reached ridiculous levels as the party date approached. She helped me create the guest list, ensuring everyone who needed to witness her downfall would be present. She suggested we rent a projector for sharing photos, not knowing I planned to use it for displaying her text messages with Warren. She even recommended hiring a photographer to capture the special moment, completely unaware that the photos would document the most humiliating night of her life. Warren's inclusion in the guest list added another layer of satisfaction to my plan. Sarah insisted we invite him and his wife since they were her work colleagues and close friends. She wanted Warren there to witness her triumph, not realizing he'd be sharing in her humiliation. His wife deserved to know what her husband had been doing, and I was going to deliver that information in the most dramatic way possible. 2 marriages were going to explode simultaneously. I booked the party, invited his wife under the guise of celebration, and cued the presentation. Screenshots of their text conversations discussing how to deceive me, photos of their dates while she claimed to be working, bank statements showing suspicious charges during their affair, medical records proving pregnancy dates that contradicted her timeline, the DNA test results showing Warren was the father. Every slide was designed to eliminate any possible denial or excuse they might attempt. The stage was set for a confrontation that would become the stuff of social circle legend. Everyone who'd ever supported Sarah's lies would witness their collapse. Everyone who'd ever trusted Warren would see his betrayal exposed. The party Sarah thought would celebrate her successful deception was going to become the setting for the most spectacular relationship implosion our friends had ever witnessed. Sarah remained completely oblivious to walking into the most elaborate trap ever constructed by a betrayed husband with unlimited time and motivation. She thought she was days away from securing her financial future through pregnancy fraud. Really, she was hours away from losing everything she'd worked to steal from me. The woman had no idea that her perfect plan was about to become the foundation for her perfect downfall. All that was left was picking the perfect date and making sure everyone was there when I hit play. The calm before the storm. Final preparations. 2 hours before guests arrived, I ran through the slides one last time. My laptop sat open with the presentation that would end Sarah's world loaded and ready. Every screenshot perfectly cropped, every piece of evidence organized for maximum impact, every slide timed to deliver devastating blows in perfect sequence. The projector was tested, the backup files were ready, and my speech was memorized. This masterpiece of revenge was about to premiere. Sarah's excitement reached levels that would have impressed lottery winners. She spent the morning getting ready like she was attending her own coronation instead of her public execution. She picked out that tight red dress from Miami, the one she thought made her look sophisticated but actually highlighted her bump perfectly. She did her makeup with extra care, styled her hair like she was posing for magazine covers, and kept checking herself in mirrors with this satisfied smile that made me want to laugh out loud. The woman was primping for the most humiliating night of her life and had no idea what was coming. Family and friends started arriving completely unaware they were about to witness relationship warfare at its finest. Sarah's parents came bearing gifts for their future grandchild. My brother showed up with champagne to celebrate the wonderful news. Warren arrived with his wife Patricia, both acting like the perfect work colleagues supporting their friend's big announcement. Everyone was playing their assigned roles in Sarah's fiction while I prepared to burn down the entire production. The innocence in that room was about to be shattered into a million pieces. Sarah's confidence hit peak levels that would have made motivational speakers jealous. She glided around the room accepting congratulations like she'd actually accomplished something worthy of praise. She rubbed her belly with this maternal glow that was probably genuine, but felt completely fake given the circumstances. She kept catching my eye across the room and giving me these loving looks that said, "We did it, we're going to be parents together." The disconnect between her perceived reality and actual reality was so massive it created its own gravitational field. The timing and coordination required for this public exposure demanded military precision. I'd arranged for specific people to be in perfect positions when the reveal started. The photographer Sarah hired was positioned to capture everyone's reactions. The projector was angled so every person in the room would have a clear view of the evidence. My phone was recording audio as backup documentation. Even the seating arrangement was strategic, ensuring Warren and Patricia would be front and center for their own personal disaster. Sarah basked in her final moments of believing she'd won the greatest con in relationship history. She started her pregnancy announcement speech with this radiant smile that lit up the entire room. She talked about how surprised she was to discover she was pregnant, how excited we both were to start our family, and how blessed she felt to be carrying our child. Every word was a lie delivered with Oscar-worthy conviction. She had no idea she was standing on the edge of a cliff with me holding the rope that was about to break. My last-minute checks ensured this evidence presentation would be absolutely flawless. Battery levels on all devices confirmed. Internet connection tested and backup hotspot ready. Presentation slides reviewed one final time. Legal documentation organized in proper sequence. DNA test results positioned for maximum dramatic impact. I prepared for every possible technical failure, every potential interruption, every conceivable way Sarah might try to escape or deflect. This wasn't just revenge, it was a masterclass in thorough preparation. The moment of truth arrived as Sarah finished her heartfelt speech about our growing family and gestured for me to say something. The room fell silent as everyone waited for the proud father to share his thoughts about becoming a parent. I stood up slowly, walked to the projector, and took a calming sip of scotch before picking up the remote. I smiled at my wife with genuine warmth for the first time in months, not because I loved her, but because I was about to deliver justice with surgical precision. I looked around the room at all the faces filled with joy and anticipation. Sarah's parents beaming with pride about their daughter's wonderful news. My family excited about the new addition to our clan. Warren shifting uncomfortably in his chair while his wife held his hand supportively. Sarah herself glowing with confidence and satisfaction at pulling off what she thought was the perfect deception. Everyone was exactly where they needed to be for maximum impact. The presentation remote felt solid in my hand as I prepared to change every single person's night forever. Months of planning, weeks of final preparation, and hours of anticipation had led to this exact moment. Sarah stood beside me radiating happiness while I prepared to destroy every lie she'd built her scheme around. The room buzzed with excited energy that was about to transform into shocked silence and then explosive chaos. Sarah thought she was minutes away from securing her fraudulent future, but she was actually seconds away from losing everything she'd lied to steal from me. The revenge I'd planned was more thorough than anything these people had ever witnessed. Warren sat there thinking he was safe in his deception while his wife smiled proudly at his supposed friendship with Sarah. Neither of them had any idea what was coming. The room was full of smiling faces. She was ready to crow about her trap, unaware it was about to snap. The big reveal when reality hits like a freight train. I clicked to the first slide and watched Sarah's face transform from radiant confidence to absolute horror in real time. The projection screen lit up with a screenshot of her text conversation with Warren discussing how they'd trapped me with another man's child. Her smile froze mid-expression like someone had hit pause on her facial muscles. The color drained from her cheeks so fast I thought she might pass out right there next to the projector. Her eyes went wide as she read her own words about deceiving me about the baby's paternity, and I could literally see the moment her brain processed that her months of careful planning had just exploded in her face. The room erupted into gasps and confused murmurs as people tried to process what they were seeing on screen. Sarah's mother dropped her wine glass, and the sound of it shattering on the hardwood floor cut through the shocked silence. My brother's mouth fell open as he read the messages aloud to himself. People were leaning forward in their chairs, squinting at the screen like they couldn't believe what their eyes were showing them. The energy in the room shifted from celebration to chaos faster than a car accident happening in slow motion. Warren's panic was visible from across the room as he realized his secret affair was now public knowledge in front of his wife and 24 other people. His face went completely white, and he started stammering something about work meetings while Patricia stared at the screen reading messages where her husband called Sarah baby and discussed leaving his family. Warren looked like he might faint or run for the door, but Patricia had grabbed his arm with a grip that probably cut off his circulation. The man was trapped in his chair facing consequences he'd never imagined in his wildest nightmares. I clicked to the next slide showing photos from their OB/GYN appointment. Warren sitting in the waiting room like an expectant father while Sarah checked in for prenatal visits, the ultrasound images he kept in his car like trophies. Sarah's desperate attempts to salvage the situation only made everything worse. She started claiming the messages were fake, that someone had hacked her phone to frame her, but the photos destroyed any remaining credibility she thought she had left. The bank statement slide delivered another devastating blow. Screenshots of their dinner dates while she claimed to be working late. Hotel charges during her supposed business trips. The prenatal vitamin receipts from months before her alleged conception date. Every piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of her credibility, and she just stood there watching her world implode in high definition. Sarah's carefully constructed lies crumbled faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. My satisfaction reached levels that made winning the lottery look like finding pocket change. Months of careful planning were paying off beyond my wildest expectations. Every screenshot hit with perfect timing. Every piece of evidence landed like a devastating blow. The presentation flowed seamlessly from revelation to revelation, building a case so airtight that even Sarah's most loyal supporters couldn't defend her actions. This was justice delivered with surgical precision, and I was savoring every second of her public destruction. Warren's cowardly response to being exposed in front of his own family was pathetic even by cheater standards. He couldn't form complete sentences, kept looking toward the door like he was planning an escape route, and actually tried to claim he was helping Sarah plan a surprise party for me. Patricia wasn't buying any of his stuttering explanations, especially after seeing photos of him at medical appointments for another woman's pregnancy. The man was melting down in real time while his wife's anger built to volcanic levels. The DNA test results slide delivered the final devastating blow that eliminated any remaining doubt about Warren's paternity. The numbers were clear and undeniable. Warren was the biological father of Sarah's baby, not me. The room went completely silent as people absorbed this ultimate proof of her attempted fraud. Sarah's last hope of claiming coincidence or confusion evaporated instantly. She'd been caught red-handed trying to pass off another man's child as mine, and everyone in the room now knew exactly who she really was. Patricia stood up so fast her chair fell backward and slapped Warren across the face with a sound that echoed through the silent room. She called him every name in the book while he sat there taking it like he deserved worse. Sarah tried to interrupt Patricia's tirade, but my sister-in-law told her to shut up before she made things worse for herself. The solidarity between Patricia and my family was immediate and complete. Two marriages were exploding simultaneously, and the cheaters were facing united opposition from everyone they'd betrayed. Sarah's parents looked like they'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes as they realized their daughter had orchestrated one of the most elaborate relationship frauds anyone in that room had ever witnessed. Her father kept shaking his head and muttering about how he'd raised her better than this. Her mother was crying quietly while staring at her daughter like she was looking at a stranger. The disappointment and shame radiating from Sarah's own family was almost as devastating as the evidence itself. The photographer she'd hired was still documenting everything, creating a permanent record of the most devastating relationship exposure in modern history. Other people were taking photos of the projection screen with their phones, ensuring Sarah's humiliation would live forever in digital form. The immediate fallout exceeded every expectation I'd had for this confrontation. Sarah finally stopped trying to explain and just stood there sobbing while everyone she'd lied to processed the magnitude of her betrayal. The woman who'd walked into this room expecting celebration and admiration was leaving as a social pariah who destroyed her own life through pure greed and stupidity. In that silence, I knew justice had arrived. The domino effect when one revelation destroys multiple lives. The chaos spread like wildfire through every corner of Sarah and Warren's lives, destroying everything they'd worked to build over the years. What started as one night of public humiliation turned into a complete systematic demolition of their entire existence. I sat back and watched the domino effect unfold with the satisfaction of someone who'd engineered the perfect storm. Every consequence led to 3 more consequences, creating this beautiful chain reaction of justice that kept expanding beyond anything I could have planned. Patricia's Facebook exposé became the nuclear option that made my revenge look subtle by comparison. She posted everything within hours of getting home from our party. Screenshots of Warren's romantic messages to Sarah, photos from their secret dates, even the DNA test results proving he'd fathered another woman's child while lying to his own family. Patricia's social media rampage reached hundreds of people who knew Warren professionally and personally. His reputation was getting destroyed in real time across multiple platforms, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Their pharmaceutical company moved with corporate efficiency that impressed even me. Human Resources received Patricia's Facebook posts on Monday morning, complete with documented evidence of Warren and Sarah's affair spanning months. Both of them were terminated the same day, losing their jobs, benefits, and any hope of getting references for future employment. Sarah's 15-year career in pharmaceutical sales ended in a conference room meeting that lasted exactly 10 minutes. The company's strict policies about relationships between employees, especially supervisory relationships, left no room for appeals or second chances. Warren's marriage exploded with nuclear force, taking his relationship with his kids along for the ride. His teenage daughter blocked him on all social media after reading about his affair online. His son refused to talk to him when he tried calling to explain the situation. Patricia changed the locks on their house and had his belongings waiting on the front porch when he showed up begging for forgiveness. The man went from stable family life to homeless cheater in less than 48 hours. His attempts to salvage any relationship with his children were failing spectacularly because teenagers don't forgive public humiliation easily. Family relationships shattered like glass hitting concrete as relatives chose sides in the aftermath. Sarah's parents left our party without speaking to their daughter after watching the evidence presentation. Her sister stopped returning phone calls once she realized the extent of Sarah's deception. My own family rallied around me completely, offering support and legal advice while expressing their disgust at Sarah's attempts to defraud me. The social isolation was hitting Sarah harder than the financial consequences because she'd lost her entire support system overnight. Social media amplified the scandal far beyond our immediate social circle, reaching people neither Sarah nor Warren had ever met. Patricia's posts were getting shared by friends who shared them with their friends, creating this viral spread of information about the affair and pregnancy fraud. Comment sections filled with strangers expressing outrage at Sarah's deception and Warren's betrayal of his family. The story was spreading through multiple communities, ensuring their reputations would be permanently damaged across their entire professional and social network. Sarah's desperation intensified daily as every aspect of her life fell apart simultaneously. She was facing unemployment, homelessness, and complete social exile all at once. Her attempts to find sympathy from former friends were backfiring because everyone had seen the evidence of her elaborate deception. She'd lost her income, her insurance, her housing, and her credibility in the span of 1 week. The financial pressure was crushing her, while the social rejection was destroying her mental health. The financial devastation facing both cheaters was staggering in scope. Sarah was looking at over $130K in medical bills without insurance or employment. Warren faced substantial child support obligations for Sarah's baby while also paying alimony and child support to Patricia. The court calculated his payments based on his previous salary, ignoring his current unemployment status. Both of them were headed toward bankruptcy, while I remained financially protected by the prenuptial agreement and my documentation of their fraud attempts. Warren's damage control efforts created more problems than they solved. He tried telling his coworkers that Sarah had seduced him and manipulated him into the affair, which only made him look weak and unreliable. He attempted to negotiate with Patricia for joint custody of their children, but she had screenshots of his messages discussing abandoning his family for his pregnant mistress. Every excuse he made was contradicted by evidence he'd created himself through months of careless communication with Sarah. Professional consequences extended beyond their immediate terminations as word spread through their industry networks. Pharmaceutical sales is a surprisingly small community where reputation matters more than qualifications. Sarah's involvement in a workplace affair that resulted in pregnancy fraud made her unemployable in her chosen field. Warren's supervisory position made his conduct even more damaging to his career prospects. Both were facing career changes they never wanted and weren't prepared for. The legal system was working exactly as designed to protect innocent parties from fraud attempts. My evidence was so comprehensive that Sarah's attorney recommended she accept whatever settlement terms I offered rather than risk going to trial. Warren faced potential criminal charges for his role in the attempted paternity fraud scheme. The prenatal DNA testing had created ironclad proof of their deception that no legal argument could overcome. My realization that this revenge exceeded every expectation I'd had was both satisfying and slightly overwhelming. I'd planned to embarrass Sarah publicly and protect myself legally. Instead, I triggered a complete systematic destruction of two people's entire existence. Their careers were over, their families were destroyed, their financial futures were ruined, and their reputations were permanently damaged. The domino effect I'd initiated was still creating new consequences months after that initial confrontation. With their lives collapsing, I moved on to rebuild mine. Justice served cold, the sweet taste of victory. The systematic destruction of Sarah and Warren's lives unfolded exactly as I'd hoped, with consequences that kept multiplying long after that initial confrontation. My methodical approach had protected me completely while ensuring they faced maximum fallout for their deception. The satisfaction of watching justice play out in real time was worth every moment of restraint I'd shown during those months of planning. Sarah's long-term consequences became a masterclass in how poor decisions create permanent damage. She lost everything she'd worked to build over 15 years. Her pharmaceutical sales career ended permanently because word spread through industry networks faster than gossip at a high school reunion. Nobody wanted to hire someone who'd been terminated for workplace affairs and attempted fraud. She went from making 6 figures annually to working retail jobs that barely covered her basic expenses. The financial pressure crushed her while she dealt with pregnancy complications that insurance wouldn't cover after her termination. Her attempts to rebuild her reputation kept backfiring in ways that provided endless entertainment. She'd post on social media about new beginnings and personal growth, but people would comment with links to Patricia's original posts exposing the affair. She tried joining mom groups online for support, but other members would recognize her name and share the story of her pregnancy fraud attempt. Every effort she made to move forward got sabotaged by the permanent digital record of her deception. The internet doesn't forget, and Sarah learned that lesson the hard way. Warren's life continued unraveling in increasingly dramatic ways that made my original revenge look mild by comparison. He faced criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud, which his public defender said would probably result in probation and community service if he took a plea deal. His financial obligations were crushing him because the court calculated support payments based on his previous pharmaceutical sales salary, not his current unemployment benefits. He was paying child support to Patricia for their 2 kids plus support for Sarah's baby, all while living in a studio apartment and working part-time jobs. The comedy reached peak levels when Warren tried online dating, and women would recognize him from Patricia's viral Facebook posts. His dating profile lasted exactly 3 days before getting reported and removed for misleading information. He couldn't escape his reputation no matter where he went or what he tried. The man had become locally famous for being a cheating loser, and that reputation followed him everywhere. Even his own parents had cut contact after learning the full scope of his deception and betrayal. My business exploded after the divorce was finalized. Without Sarah's expensive tastes and questionable spending habits, I could reinvest everything back into growing the company. The stress of living with someone I couldn't trust had been affecting my work performance without me realizing it. When she was gone, my focus sharpened and my decision-making improved dramatically. Within 6 months, I'd landed 3 major contracts that doubled my annual revenue. The mental clarity that came with removing toxic people from my life was worth more than any settlement I could have got. The legal proceedings concluded exactly as my attorney had predicted. The prenuptial agreement held up perfectly, protecting my business assets, investments, and real estate. Sarah received nothing from our divorce except the debt she'd accumulated during her affair. The judge seemed personally offended by her attempted fraud and made comments about the importance of honesty in marriage that probably hurt worse than the financial judgment. Warren's paternity was legally established, making him responsible for all future child support payments while eliminating any claims against me. My methodical approach had protected me from every possible consequence while maximizing theirs. The documentation I'd collected eliminated any possibility of Sarah claiming I was abusive or controlling during our marriage. The timeline evidence prevented her from seeking alimony by proving her infidelity. The recorded conversations with Warren discussing their scheme protected me from any fraud accusations they might have attempted. I'd thought of everything, and it showed in how cleanly the legal process concluded. Meeting Amanda changed everything about how I approached relationships. She was a prosecutor who appreciated my thorough documentation and methodical approach to the Sarah situation. Her professional background meant she understood the importance of evidence and honesty in all aspects of life. We built our relationship on complete transparency, sharing passwords and maintaining open communication about everything. The contrast with my marriage to Sarah was striking and refreshing. Sarah's continued poor decision-making after our divorce proved I'd escaped at exactly the right time. She moved in with Warren despite his financial problems, creating this toxic living situation where 2 desperate people blamed each other for their shared misery. She kept posting passive-aggressive social media content about forgiveness and moving forward, which only reminded people of her original deception. Her inability to take responsibility for her choices showed she hadn't learned anything from the experience. The pregnancy itself became another source of drama, as complications arose from stress and poor prenatal care. Sarah couldn't afford quality medical attention after losing her insurance, so she relied on emergency room visits and free clinics. Warren's attempts to be supportive mostly involved complaining about money problems and making Sarah feel guilty about their situation. Their relationship was falling apart under the pressure of consequences they'd created together. I started a support group for men who'd been through similar situations. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of guys reached out sharing their own stories of attempted paternity fraud, financial manipulation, and elaborate deception schemes. We meet monthly to discuss legal strategies, share resources, and remind each other that we're not crazy for trusting our instincts when something feels wrong. The group has become a valuable resource for men navigating divorce and custody battles. Most importantly, don't let anger drive your decision-making process. The coldest revenge is letting people face the natural consequences of their own choices, amplified by perfect timing and thorough documentation. Sarah and Warren destroyed their own lives through greed and stupidity. I just made sure they couldn't drag me down with them. Documentation and patience saved me from a lifetime trap. The whole experience taught me lessons about human nature that no business school could have provided. The biggest takeaway from this entire mess is simple. Trust actions over words, document everything, and don't rush emotional confrontations. Sarah's months of lies crumbled because I treated my own marriage like a cybersecurity investigation, following digital breadcrumbs until the truth became undeniable. Patience beats emotional reactions every single time when you're dealing with deception. Modern relationships face a dangerous problem where cheaters think they're smarter than their partners, forgetting that technology makes everyone a potential detective. Sarah learned that underestimating your spouse's intelligence can destroy your entire life. If you've ever spotted red flags in your own relationship, share your story below and subscribe for more true-life comedies and cautionary tales.